a lot of people ask young people. And maybe some of the young people in this room have already been asked this question a couple of times. Can you guess what I'm thinking of? What do you want to be when you grow up? Yeah, I'm not a big fan of that question. I don't like to ask anybody that question because it's really hard to know. I had no idea that I would be here, 3 years ago. But more so because of that, I wanted to fill these books with all the stories of very diverse paths and fields of study to encourage young people to know that there are so many opportunities out there for them. So if you guys are with me, I'm going to read a couple today. Is that all right? I'm going to read some from Little Leaders and also from Little Dreamers. So I really like to start with one of my favorites. I think I have a soft spot for the artists, so don't judge me, but I really love the story of this woman, Augusta Savage, who's right on the cover. She's right there. Now she's on page 26. Okay, so Augusta Savage was born 1892 and died in 1962. She was an educator and a sculptor. Here she is. Augusta grew up in a poor family with 13 brothers and sisters in Green Cove Springs, Florida. As a child, she had no toys to play with, but she loved to make things. Augusta spent time in her backyard where the soil was rich with natural red clay. This was where she learned to make miniature animals for herself and others. However, her father did not approve of her creativity. Even though it meant angering him, Augusta continued to sculpt. In 1921, she moved to Harlem, a prominent African-American neighborhood in New York City. At the time, the community was experiencing an exciting boom in the arts known as the Harlem Renaissance, and Augusta was a part of it. She thrived artistically, but this did not change the hardships of racism that were still prevalent in the United States and around the world. Augusta openly fought racial prejudice in the art world and was labeled a troublemaker. She said that she was standing up not only for herself, but for future students of color. Augusta dedicated much of her life to teaching and encouraging young people to pursue their artistic passion. She felt that their creations could be a part of her legacy. In Harlem, she opened her own school, the Savage School of Arts and Crafts, and she became the first director of the Harlem Community Arts Center. In 1939, she created Lift Every Voice and Sing, also known as the Harp. Despite her artistic success, Augusta struggled with finances and racism until late in life, but she always found a way to keep making art. Here she is, and in the background I kind of drew one of her most famous pieces, the harp, and a few of her smaller ones. Now the reason this story means so much to me is particularly because it's quite sad. It was very hard for her to continue making art, and but it's just really special and amazing that she kept going, and every step of the way was a struggle, but she still knew what she wanted to do, and she knew that she wanted to help young people in that path as well. And so I think that's a really great testament to following the thing that you love, and knowing that it may not always be a Cinderella story at the end, but the fact that she started these schools was so beautiful. The first story that I wrote before this was a book, when this was just my little challenge for myself, was Sojourner Truth. So I had known about Sojourner Truth. I definitely knew her name as an activist, an abolitionist, a women's rights activist, but this is the thing that changed for me when I started working on books like this. I read her story, and I was writing about her, and I drew this little picture of her, and it was really early in the morning, like 3 o'clock in the morning. I was going to post this drawing, and I was just crying my eyes out because suddenly she wasn't just this person in, this figure in history. She was a human being. She was a real person. She was a mother with feelings, and so that's what changed for me, and that's what I realized is what I can bring to these books, is this this empathy and this connection to these stories, and I really long for the ability to share that with other people. So I'm going to read her, and then I'm going to read one from Little Dreamers, okay? So if you want to follow along, Sojourner Truth is on page 4. Sojourner Truth was born circa around 1797 and passed away in 1883. She was an abolitionist, women's rights activist, and advocate. Sojourner was born enslaved in upstate New York under the name Isabella Baum Free. Under the state's General Emancipation Act, she was due her freedom in 1827. When she realized her slave owner was planning to keep her enslaved, Sojourner ran away with her infant daughter in tow. But this came at a huge cost. She had to leave behind her 5-year-old son. The slave owner sold Sojourner's son to a plantation 1,000 miles away in Alabama. Meanwhile, Sojourner remained in hiding in New York until her freedom was official. When the coast was clear, Sojourner filed a court case saying her son had been sold illegally. She was one of the first black women to file a court case in America, and even though it seemed nearly impossible, she won. She got her son back. In 1843, she changed her name to Sojourner, which means traveler, and became a preacher. She traveled the country, sharing her messages for women's rights and the abolition of slavery everywhere. Although Sojourner could neither read nor write, her voice carried far. In December 1851, she gave a speech that she made up right on the spot. In it, she advocated on behalf of black women who faced double discrimination of racism and sexism and had often been left out of the fight for equality. The speech is known by its most famous refrain, "Ain't I a woman?" She went on to encourage African Americans to fight on behalf of the Union in the Civil War, for former slaves to be given places to live, and for the desegregation of streetcars. She was an agitator and a fierce activist for equality. So that's Sojourner Truth. And now I would really love to share one more with you from my second book, Little Dreamers, Visionary Women Around the World. So this one was a very, a special book for me because, you know, as much as I saw myself in the stories of these incredible black women in history, I definitely, you know, identify as an artist, and there's something really special about the stories of creative people that, you know, can be so encouraging. So I wanted to share a lot of these stories, and I was mostly interested in this intersection of art and science, because we often associate creativity with art. But there's this one special woman who I want to read her story, Ada Lovelace, who really thought that there was this incredible connection between art and science, and that you can really only understand an idea if you can approach it from multiple viewpoints. And I really hope that can open up the minds of young people to seeing the power within them and the creativity that they have. So if you have Little Dreamers, you can follow along on page 6. So Ada Lovelace, you guys can see, was born in 1815 and passed away in 1852. She was a computer programmer from England. What happens when imagination and technology collide? Well, Ada herself was a physical embodiment of such a collision. Her father was the poet Lord Byron, and her mother, Anne Isabel Milbank, loved math. Perhaps the combination of her parents' sensibilities was what made Ada so special. Her unique view of the world meant that she didn't just dream of being a fairy, she also knew she needed to devise a way to fly. Ada grew up during the Industrial Revolution, a time when scientists and artists gathered to discuss new inventions and creations. At one such meeting, Ada saw the mathematician Charles Babbage demonstrate a mechanical adding machine. Ada asked Charles to mentor her, but he turned her down at first. He was working on something new, the analytical engine, Ada translated an Italian article about his new machine into English. She added her own notes, making her translation nearly 3 times as long as the original article. She understood that the analytical engine could be programmed to do limitless tasks and described a formula for programming it to calculate a mathematical sequence of numbers known as the Bernoulli numbers. Ada had a vision of general-purpose computing a century before anyone would build one. Although Ada and Charles finally worked together, they never built the analytical engine. Ada's contributions went unappreciated until the 1950s, when her translation of the article was discovered. Her work on the Bernoulli numbers is considered the first ever computer program and made Ada the first computer programmer. Ada believed firmly in what she called poetical science, the synthesis of creativity and technology, and that human imagination could be combined with technology to kickstart the future. So that's Ada Lovelace. And I feel like, working on this book, one, I had to learn a whole lot of new stuff. Experimental physics, beta decay. It was a very intense learning process. But one thing that I felt was kind of a through line with a lot of these people is that they were very misunderstood for a lot of their lifetime. A lot of people just couldn't get what they were seeing, and that's why I called it visionary women. They saw this future, this vision of the future that not too many people could see. And I think what's special about some of them is they knew that people may not get them in their lifetime, but their work could live on, and I think it's an incredible thing. So there are 34 more women in this book to learn about, and a bunch of little extras. And as of earlier this week, the board book edition of this one came out. So if you're not ready to learn about beta decay and experimental physics, we have the simplified one for toddlers, as well as, so that one's called Think Big Little One, and then the board book edition of Little Leaders is called Dream Big Little One. So those are also available in case some of the words in this one are a little tough, even for me, but I think that's what's fun about reading. Okay, so really quickly, I would love to show you guys some of my drawing. Do you guys want to see how I draw the little leader? Okay. Heavenly glow. All right, I'm going to do this freehand. So it may be a little bit wonky. That's my way of saying, like, don't judge me if it doesn't look perfect. Okay, so most of drawing, almost all of drawing, is learning how to take complicated things and simplify them down into shapes that we all know and understand. So I'm going to start with a circle. But the best thing about it is that it shouldn't be a perfect circle. It should be a little bit smushy, kind of like if you took a hamburger, smushed it down a little bit. Okay? You guys do that? The next step, now this is the part where you have to like pay a lot of attention. The next step is the letter C. You guys know how to draw the letter C? Yeah? Kind of looks like that. And I'm going to take that same shape and flip it upside down to do some eyebrows. I'm going to use that same shape to make a nose. And I'm going to flip it over one more time and do a nice big smile. Can you guys do that? It's pretty complicated, I know. Now I draw the little leader's eyes closed because I like to imagine that they're these little kids dressing up as these famous people, kind of imagining themselves in the world of these incredible legends and leaders. But you're more than welcome to open up their eyes. I really like this kind of style. It reminds me of the illustrators that I love from this period called the mid-century period of illustration. People like Mary Blair. Have you guys ever seen the Little Miss Sunshine or Mr. Happy books, the Roger Hargreaves? If you look at the cover of Mr. Happy, it's called Mr. Happy. He doesn't have a huge smile on his face. He's not cheesing. He's got his eyes closed and he's got this very sweet smile. And to me, that's the epitome of sweetness. And that's what I wanted the little leaders to feel like. Especially because I was thinking about that study that I read. And I wanted to make these, especially the first book, I wanted to make these little black girls just feel so sweet and adorable. I didn't need them to, I didn't want them to feel larger than life, It may be hard to live up to the idea of Sojourner Truth or like Oprah. But hopefully these are like easy, comforting little characters. So now from this shape, I can literally turn it into anybody. I might keep going and add some hair. Like if I wanted to do my hair, I might add like one big C, another big C. It's a little bit poofy. Actually, this looks a little bit like on the cover, Ida B. Wells. She has this nice big Victorian outfit on. So she's got these big poofy collar. So sometimes I might do a lot of this part in pencil and go back over and choose my favorite lines. I had to learn a long time ago that a lot of making art is about making mistakes and being comfortable with that. One of my favorite quotes is from this artist, this person who was a instructor for artists and animators at the Walt Disney Studios. His name is Walt Stanchfield, and he said, "Each one of us has 10,000 bad drawings inside of us. The sooner we get them out, the better." And I think that's really, really true. Because, like I said, I wasn't always drawing. I wasn't always planning on becoming an illustrator. I liked to draw when I was a kid, but I stopped for a long time. And I picked it up again when I was in film school. Now, show of hands, how many of you guys think, like, after I stopped drawing for about 6 years, how many of you guys think when I started again, I was about as good or not really good? Pretty good? Not really good. You guys are right, I was not very good at all, because I learned very quickly that if you don't practice something, you're not going to be good at it. And so that actually made it so much easier for me to know that, oh wow, it's not that I can't do it, I just need to practice at it. And so in that way, it became so much easier to just keep going.